Afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining me. Good to have you here. I think, as you remember, about a year ago, the Lieutenant Governor and I had a press conference in the Capitol, and both of us called for the legalization of recreational marijuana. At that meeting, the Lieutenant Governor formally handed over his report that was based on his 67-county tour, plus I think 44,000 connections through email or snail mail, where people weighed in on what they thought about recreational marijuana legalization. And this was not intended to be a scientific sampling, but 65 to 70%, I think, of the people that the Lieutenant Governor talked to were in favor of it. And the report had some really good recommendations that I thought made some sense. So both of us called on the General Assembly to take a serious look at the legalization of adult use regulated cannabis. And today, nothing's been done, a year later, so I am renewing that call. Because I think now more than ever, especially right in the middle of this pandemic, we have a desperate need for the economic boost that the legalization of cannabis could provide. As you know, some states have already done this. In Washington State, adult use cannabis brought in $319 million in their fiscal year 2018. Colorado, that figure was $266 million in the same year. And that is, both of those states are much smaller than, of course, Pennsylvania. And neither of these figures count the secondary economic impacts of the additional jobs that were created and additional money that was circulating throughout the economy as a result. I'm proposing that we legalize adult use cannabis here in Pennsylvania. And with a portion of the revenue, my suggestion would be, I think I'd be open to all kinds of different suggestions, but I think it should be earmarked. And I think that's what the Lieutenant Governor heard on his listening tour. And as an example, 50% of these grants could be earmarked for historically disadvantaged businesses. I mean, I think that would be a really important thing right now in the middle of this pandemic, because many of these businesses have had difficulties attaining other assistance because of systemic issues. Another portion of this revenue could go toward restorative justice. Restorative justice programs that give priority to repairing the harm done through all those years when recreational marijuana was criminalized. Now, I understand it's going to take time to get a legal adult use cannabis program up and running, but there are things that the legislature can do right now, very quickly. And we need to work quickly, especially when it comes to things like restorative justice. So I am also asking the General Assembly to pursue criminal justice reform policies that restore justice for people convicted of cannabis-related offenses. Obviously, if we legalize recreational marijuana, that means that the people who are possessing recreational marijuana today will no longer be made criminals because of it. This will help more Pennsylvanians get back into the workforce by eliminating the prior conviction hurdle. We can also make this retroactive to go back and seal the records of people who have been accused and imprisoned in too many cases because of possession of, some cases, very small quantities of recreational marijuana. In the past year, the legislature has failed to find time to debate, let alone pass, adult use cannabis, even though this is an issue that affects thousands of Pennsylvanians through our criminal justice system right now. And it can provide millions of dollars in much needed revenue at a time when we desperately need that revenue. In the meantime, many Pennsylvanians are traveling to other states where adult use cannabis is actually legal. They're spending their money there. And we're missing out on the economic benefits and the tax revenues that could be coming to us. Right now, especially now, we should not be ignoring these opportunities. The time has come to legalize adult use cannabis in Pennsylvania. It will help our economic recovery, it will help Pennsylvania families, and will help make our criminal justice system fairer. It's what the majority of Pennsylvanians want. Thank you. And now I'm going to turn this over to Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman. Yeah, you go next, and then Senator.
Thank you, Governor.
Sure.
There's a lot of things that the governor touched on, but I wanted to kind of put that in graph form. And I would just look at you, urge you to consider this chart that we had printed out. These represent a decade's worth of arrests for cannabis in Pennsylvania, and these are our state police numbers. And as you can see, they average over 20,000 arrests a year. So if you go over the span of a decade, you're talking nearly 250,000 Pennsylvanians that now have some affiliation with the criminal justice system for nothing more than consuming a plant that's actually legal in 12 jurisdictions across this country, and that's counterproductive. And I would make that argument on any number of grounds. The uneven racial enforcement of cannabis prohibition in Pennsylvania, the fact that it makes these individuals less marketable from employability. It excludes them from participating in their children's activities because they can't pass a criminal background check. It might mean they can't get an apartment or a loan or a business loan, you name it. I would pitch this as much as a jobs bill as much as anything, not to mention legalizing recreational marijuana in Pennsylvania would create tens of thousands of jobs that require no subsidy, no kind of guidance other than just to rewrite the law and allow this business to flourish here in Pennsylvania. It's a turnkey solution for Pennsylvania. And I would challenge anyone, my most intensely opposed critics, to name one other policy decision that could have so much immediate impact and so much unambiguous benefit, both in terms to our treasury, to our employment statewide, to our social justice concerns that we have on the uneven enforcement, as well as to our farmers. I pitch this to our red counties, our Republican-led counties. Our farmers need a cash crop. You know, our small counties need an economic boost, and they need employability, and this offers all of that. And the downside is it's a substance that has no known medical overdoses. We have legalized alcohol. We have legalized tobacco. We have legalized opioids. And all of these substances cause hundreds of thousands of deaths over the years. Meanwhile, we have marijuana illegal in Pennsylvania. And that, again, contributes to about 250,000 Pennsylvanians with a record over the course of a decade. You know, I'm so grateful to serve a governor that sees how important these kind of issues are and why now is the time. You know, we believed it was the time before the pandemic hit. But now that we've had this pandemic hit and we are facing significant budgetary shortfalls, again, I would challenge anybody, come up with a better solution that can deliver hundreds of millions of dollars to the state treasury for small business development, economic development, employment, the way as rapidly and as easily that simply allowing recreational cannabis would have in Pennsylvania. And now it's my pleasure to turn the floor over to Senator Sharif Street.
Good afternoon. I'm so pleased to be here, Governor. I want to thank you for your leadership in this space. Lieutenant Governor Fetterman, thank you for your commitment to reform in this area. Cannabis, it is time to end the prohibition of cannabis in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. It is time for Pennsylvanians to enjoy the benefits. So much of what needs to be said has already been said, but I want to make it clear in a few ways. One, most Pennsylvanians don't believe cannabis should in fact remain illegal. Two, cannabis there's never been an overdose of cannabis that we know of. Three, although cannabis use amongst African Americans, Latinos, white folks is about the same, in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, blacks and Latinos are 4 to 5 times more likely to have a law enforcement encounter with due to cannabis use than are white folks. And so what we've decided is it's not really something we need to enforce, but when we do enforce it, we enforce it in a disparate lawyer word or just unfair way. We need the revenue. Our business communities are hurting in so many ways. This cannabis is a crop, and this some people may not know, that works very well in a rotation with corn for dairy farmers. Cannabis actually puts nitrogen back into the soil and allows other crops to grow better. So it fits well in a crop rotation, and the excess parts of the plant that aren't necessarily good for traditional commercial purposes can be used for feed. So an industry like dairy that's been underwater for over 2 years, this will be a cash crop that those farmers could sell, would help effectively subsidizing the dairy industry, and would stabilize our other vegetable crops like corn. And my grandfather was a dairy farmer, so a little bit about farming, even though I live in the city. The Auditor General has estimated $600 million in recurring revenue. That's not my numbers, that's the Auditor General's numbers. But even if he's a little off, $500 million in additional revenue without having to pass a broad-based tax on ordinary Pennsylvanians that are already hurting is something we shouldn't deny. There have been proven benefits to hospitality industry. We know our hospitality industry is really taking a beating because of this pandemic, and they're going to need to bounce back. And giving them the edge by having cannabis tourism, something that could benefit people throughout the Commonwealth, is tremendously helpful. So it can generate revenue, which could be used to reduce taxes, or it could be used for something like education or small business grants, or victim services. We could make, and one final point that I almost forgot. Do you know that the guy standing in the alley or in the parking lot sitting in his car who's selling cannabis right now to people, because people are using it, he doesn't care he doesn't card you to see whether you should use it, but a licensed Pennsylvania business would. And so when all of the adult customers are gone and cannabis is sold cheaper through a regulated market where we know exactly what you're getting because it's labeled and tested, that guy in the alley's gone. And for all those high school kids, they're trying to have a big party and go buy some cannabis, it'll be a lot more difficult for them to get their hands on cannabis. So juvenile usage will actually drop. So we'll help protect our kids, we'll help our small businesses, we'll take some burden off of Pennsylvanians, and we'll help bail out our hospitality industry and small businesses. That's what we can do with cannabis. The time to pass cannabis legislation is now. And Governor, I thank you for leading in this space. Lieutenant Governor, thank you for being by our side.
So now any of us would be happy to take questions. Before let me just say, I want to thank the Lieutenant Governor. He has taken the lead on this and has been a very eloquent spokesman on behalf of legalization of recreational marijuana. And also Senator Street and Representative Jake Wheatley. The two of them have also been consistent leaders on this issue, and that has made a big difference. So I really welcome the support of all of you in this. So now we'll open it up for questions. Yes?
I spoke to the House Republican caucus this morning. They say that this is not a recovery plan. They say this focuses too much on new programs instead of existing problems like getting kids back to school and opening businesses right now. And they also said it couldn't come at a worse time when substance abuse is already high during the pandemic. What is your response to that?
It doesn't make any sense at all. This is a time, are they saying this is a time when we don't need hundreds of millions of dollars of additional revenue that could go to help people who are hurting because of the pandemic? I guess I don't understand the question.
Overall, they were calling it a distraction, saying that we should be focusing more right now on getting kids back to school and other issues.
I think what we ought to be focusing on is programs that would help people. That's one, getting kids back to school, focusing on things that might help people who are suffering from all kinds of things, but we're going to need money for that. This is a heaven-sent opportunity to do that.
And if I may interject.
Here, come over here.
And if I may interject, this idea that we have addiction challenges in the Commonwealth, safe, legal access to cannabis is exactly what we need to combat that. I think, quite frankly, they're trying to deflect because they know it's popular. They know a majority of their constituents want this. They know a significant majority of all Pennsylvanians want this. And I can't for the life of me understand why they, as to the governor's point, they would turn down hundreds of millions of dollars in annual revenue, tens of thousands of unsubsidized jobs, at a point when we've never needed it more right now here in the Commonwealth.
Yes.
Governor, to expand on her question, there was a state rep yesterday from, I believe, Luzerne County, who intimated that because of the lockdowns, these kids are near their families more often, and people who are addicts, both alcohol and drugs, marijuana, adding marijuana to the list is not going to happen. I forget, I'm paraphrasing, of course. That's what she had to say yesterday, and I guess that's kind of the question that she's asking as well. Or do you feel that adding marijuana to possibly alcohol and drug abuse is...
I don't know where to even start with that. Let me just start,
Just repeating it.
Reefer madness.
Yeah,
But I mean, first of all, is she suggesting, or he's suggesting that marijuana is not available at this point? And that it's not in the mix? I'm pretty sure that it is. Second of all, I'm not sure, I'm not a medical doctor, but I'm not sure how anybody would see this as something that is addictive. Put this in the same category as opioids or heroin or something else. Senator.
I would respond in this way. There's a lot of evidence that when you move forward with cannabis legalization, the addictions to opioids actually drops. That's just what the data suggests. Further, I grew up in a neighborhood where I knew people who dealt drugs. And the reality is that if you have a cannabis in a market where it's regulated and it's tested, you can't lace it with other things. Cannabis by itself doesn't cause addiction. You know how people get addicted? They get addicted when someone thinks they're buying cannabis and it's laced with methamphetamines. It's laced with embalming fluid. And then the person is now using a drug they never intended to use because they were trying to buy cannabis in a back alley and they didn't know what they were really getting. And so in a market where it's regular, and that's what's happening right now. That's what's going on. It's not cannabis. People are given something called K2, which is a chemical substance, putting it in cannabis and selling it on the streets. That could never happen in a regulated market. So what we have is an unregulated market. What we have is the Wild West, if you will. And what we're proposing, and we're getting no revenue, we're just taxing our law enforcement that has to go out there and deal with this. And if we can have a regulated market where people can know what they're getting, that where they're getting something that's safe, that's tested, then that would stop some of these problems. And I think in this environment, that's the best time to do it, because we can put some revenue in the pockets of the Commonwealth and take some pressure off of our law enforcement.
Yeah.
I mean, just piggybacking off of both of these, look, just to talk turkey, I mean, have there been, real negotiations with either the Republican caucus in the House or Senate in that year, even now? I mean, is there anything that's going to be scheduled? Because it's clear that, the three major bills that are sitting in committee right now at the State House are not moving.
Right.
I guess what I'm trying to say, you probably know better than I, that it will take some negotiation with the Republicans to get these moving, anywhere at any time. So what's going on?
There's nothing going on. There are three bills, but they're languishing, and that's why we're having this press conference to say, remember a year ago, we brought this up, the Lieutenant Governor took a lot of time and energy to go around the Commonwealth to talk to Pennsylvanians, ordinary Pennsylvanians, how they felt about this, that listening tour, and talked to tens of thousands of people or had tens of thousands of suggestions come in. So we unveiled that a year ago. Nothing's happened. So this is an effort to get that to start again. Yeah.
Have you reached out to any Republicans to negotiate what you might want to see into law and what their...
No, because
That's why I'm inviting that kind of conversation to start. We haven't had anything. It's been dead silence. I don't know, maybe you've...
I think, Look, and I'm not going to out colleagues, but there are a number of Republicans in the Senate, and I believe in the House too, who understand that this is an idea whose time is coming if it hasn't already come. And so, yes, I've had discussions with Republicans, and I believe that if there were a vote, there would be a significant number of Republicans prepared to vote for it, and I'm not prepared to say which ones.
Can I just add that
Come over here.
cannabis prohibition is a true minority viewpoint within Pennsylvania. A small minority of Pennsylvanians oppose the legalization of cannabis. So this isn't shocking. This isn't something controversial. This is held up to Senator Street's point. We know we're right. And we're inviting the Republicans to the table to say, we need the revenue, we need the jobs, we need the freedom, and we need the criminal justice reform. And we can all be a part of making Pennsylvania better and taking this step forward. So it just comes down to understanding that New Jersey is going to legalize marijuana in November, in 63 days. And 40% of our state's population will be a half an hour drive or less from legal marijuana. I think our legal marijuana would be better than theirs. I mean, although I'm biased, I would rather have it be ours, not New Jersey's.
Yes, Dennis.
Governor, you said a moment ago that the legislature, is still piggybacking on the same theme, that the legislature has failed to find the time to move on this. Leaders in both the House and the Senate, Republican, have said you failed to find the time to actually meet with them in person. And in a number of press conferences now over the last couple of weeks, you've said your staffs have been meeting. But when was the last time you personally have had a conversation with the leaders of either the House or the Senate, Republican leaders, you specifically the governor?
I'm not sure when that was. I don't have a date. I don't want to.
Criticism is, and they both have used the term, you're legislating by press conference and you're not actually engaging with
That's
them.
that's not true. The way negotiations take place is that when it's appropriate, I do deal and talk either on the phone or personally with the legislative leaders. Absent that, my staff, starting with my chief of staff, is talking with them every day. So I'm not sure what the charge is here. Yeah, we're in constant communication. And I'm in constant communication with my chief of staff, and if need be, I intervene. So I'm not sure when the last time, but it wasn't that long ago. It's not like we haven't been talking. Yeah.
Just to follow up
Yeah, John.
on legislative opposition, I mean, it seems like House Republicans in particular are framing this in, significant moral terms, whereas you and the Lieutenant Governor and Senator Street are looking at, the revenue and economic impacts and criminal justice impacts. With those two positions kind of very ideologically apart, how do you bridge that gap and get to a point where you can negotiate on this going?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I've spoken with a number of Republicans who don't see it the way you just laid it out, who see it as a very practical issue in the same way that prohibition of alcohol didn't work in the 20s and 30s. In this country, back in the 20th century, I think the prohibition on recreational marijuana has proven to be pretty ineffective. And so I don't see it as a moral issue. I see this as right now a very practical issue that a time when we need revenue, at a time when we really need to help especially businesses, small and disadvantaged businesses, especially businesses in the hospitality space, this would be a perfect way to raise the funds in a non-onerous way. Something that's already going on, that's unregulated, and actually bring some real benefits to Pennsylvanians. John.
Governor, one of the arguments, to follow up on Justin's question, one of the arguments that House Republicans have been making throughout this debate, that as long as marijuana remains a Schedule I substance, according to the DEA, they cannot move forward because they fear federal preemption. I mean, can you spell out what the rebuttal to that is?
Yeah, the same. I think the same argument was raised by opponents of medical marijuana, and yet, and there are some inconveniences. The banking system is somewhat has a difficult time with it because it's still Schedule I drug. So there are some issues as a result of that. But I think as more and more states come on board, as the Lieutenant Governor said, New Jersey is coming on board. The federal government has shown a real disinclination to.
If I may add, remember a time when medical marijuana was controversial or a bridge too far for for many Republican legislators. And on my 67 county tour, 99% of people loved it, even those that weren't ready for recreational. In fact, medical marijuana has helped change a lot more heart and minds than more than anything else, because they see that it's actually not the reefer madness boogeyman they've always been taught to believe it to be. Medical marijuana is supported by 70% of Mississippi voters. You know, last I checked, that's not exactly like Berkeley, you know? This is, again, I want to reemphasize, it's a minority view to be opposed to marijuana. And it's time Pennsylvania gets ahead of the curve on this.
Just very quickly as follow-up. Are you saying it's just a matter of benign neglect by the feds that they've chosen not to act on this, or is there a specific legal end around it?
We have a lawyer here, so let me, that's the lawyer.
So, there's no federal preemption issue. Federal government and Congress have the right to regulate interstate commerce. The reason that states across the country have been able to move forward with cannabis legalization is it can be performed as long as it's a matter of intra-state, as in commerce that occurs within the Commonwealth. The Commonwealth is a sovereign and has the ability to regulate commerce that is solely contained within it. So we couldn't do seed to sale outside of interstate seed to sale, but as long as the plant is grown, processed, and consumed in Pennsylvania, there's no federal preemption, because that would require it to cross state lines, which is why you can't do banking, because banking is networked over telecommunications lines that require wire transfers that involve interstate commerce. But if you have a cash-based business, it is well regulated and has been litigated that states have the ability to regulate cannabis use as a matter of intrastate commerce, and there are 7 states that are doing it. So this is not this is established law, and so there's no federal preemption issue.
Thank you for clarifying that, Senator.
I have one more question.
Yes, who hasn't gone? Did I called on you? Anybody? You have a question?
Run it back.
Yeah, go ahead.
I want to pivot to election reform, and I want to ask you about HB 2626. It was changed yesterday, on the day before yesterday, and it passed in the House. It's now in the Senate. In its current form, would you support it or would you veto it, and what are some fixes you'd like to see?
There are a number of fixes I'd like to see. I would veto that in its present form. So it's now in the Senate. It passed the House. If it comes back in the form that it passed the House, I would veto it. I think there's some things that cause me concern in terms of reducing access to the polls, which is not something that a healthy democracy needs. We need to increase access. I'm all for anything that does that, something that doesn't. The other thing is it doesn't address all the issues that I think the county commissioners brought up. They're the ones that are in the front lines. They're the ones that have to deal with the practical realities of counting the ballots and processing all the votes by mail. And to the extent the things that they called for in a letter to the General Assembly, to the extent that those things are ignored, I think that's a problem for me.
Governor, the county starts sending out mail-in ballots on the 15th. Or 14th, pardon me.
Yeah.
Given the closeness of that deadline, you've just said you would veto 2626. Is there enough, are you talking with leaders, and is there enough time to get to an agreeable product?
We have been. We have been in conversations, but they ceased when they dropped this bill, and so at this point, we're not having conversations.
Their time to get something done before the 14th.
That's a good question.
Governor, just one last reaction to President Trump and the CDC and the eviction moratorium. They should give people till the end of the year. Do you applaud that? And I know you were concerned.
Yeah. No, I do applaud. And what I tried to do yesterday, these days are sort of coming together, but tried to do was say there are a couple things that are still a concern. The CDC goes till December 27th, which is great, but it doesn't include mortgage foreclosures. And so people who are facing foreclosure due to mortgage, I think that's also an issue that has to be dealt with. I think the CDC guidelines have a cap that the Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency says really has kept a lot of renters from even taking advantage of it, $700 a month, so that landlords that at that level don't even want to participate. I think the average rent I hear is like over $1,000. So the $700 caps, and then there are also some red tape issues, some bureaucratic issues that could be cleaned up. So that's a nice start, but I think there are things that the General Assembly could do to actually address that and would actually make the lives of landlords and tenants and mortgage holders a lot easier. Thank you very much, everybody.
Just wanted to quickly, can I,
Yeah.
one last thing on that point. I think it was great that the president finally did something in that space. I would point out the difference between the CDC, what the CDC did in terms of helping some people whose incomes aren't that low, aren't that high. But if you're a middle-class family of two, where you were, say, making $85,000 each, you're a realtor and somebody owned a barber shop, and you're not eligible. If you are a property owner and your mortgages are due, you're not eligible. And when that, it didn't say that they're not due, it said that you can't move forward with evictions. So that means that while you're not paying it, interest and penalties accrued. If the president would step up, like Speaker Pelosi did, and get them to pass the HEROES Act, people could get the relief they really need. We can make sure that mortgages are paid. We can make sure that there's financial stability. We could end the cliff, and we can move forward. I just thought it was really important. He took a little baby step, but I think that what Speaker Pelosi and the leadership in the House did goes a lot further.
Okay, thanks very much, everybody.